With the sudden announcement of drummer Mike Portnoy's return to Dream Theater in October 2023, a little over 2 weeks before the 20-year anniversary of this particular record, my excitement to discuss this 5-piece band on the channel has hit a fever pitch. On November 11th, 2003, Dream Theater's 7th studio album, Train of Thought, was released through Elektra Records and was a turning point for the band at the time. An observation of crowd reactions during the tour of their preceding record was the catalyst for what fans received with this entry in the band's catalog. While some fans were hesitant to accept the heavier direction of the record, new fans discovered the band in droves. I was one of them. Thanks to a friendly recommendation from my father to check this record out back in 2004, what resulted was a huge passion for the band that has been rekindled by the return of one of the founding members that made the record possible. My name is Aaron, bringing you a look back at the album that introduced me to my all-time favorite band during the mid-2000s. This is a tale of Dream Theater's Train of Thought. In the fall of 1985, another semester at Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts was underway. Among the freshmen were two longtime friends from Kings Park in Long Island, New York, guitarist John Petrucci and bass guitarist John Myung. As the fates would have it, there was a third freshman there who caught their attention one day as he jammed on the drums in a rehearsal room. This was Mike Portnoy, and all three quickly found common ground in the school cafeteria shortly after. Each from Long Island, each with nearly identical tastes in heavy and prog music, and each with a deep commitment to jam as a three-piece before the next class. Soon enough, their musical chemistry flourished, and while waiting in line for tickets to see Rush, another one of my favorite bands, during their Power Windows tour, the song Bastille Day fueled their passion to pursue a music career together. After someone in the group noted that Rush's music sounded so majestic, the term Majesty stuck as a suitable name for a new band. But before the journey could begin, the three friends set out to find a keyboardist and a lead vocalist. Enter Kevin Moore, a keyboardist who had played in a band with Petrucci and Myung prior to pursuing his education at State University of New York. After Portnoy got along well with Moore, all four students decided to leave their collegiate studies behind to go all in on the road of rock. As for a lead vocalist, another longtime friend of Petrucci's from Kings Park, Chris Collins, impressed his future bandmates with his vocal covers of Queensryche songs at the time. This was the original lineup for Majesty, the new progressive metal band with a wide array of musical influences in metal, prog rock, and classical music. Starting out with material composed by Petrucci, Myung, and Portnoy during their time at Berklee, the band played local venues in New York throughout 1986. Although Collins' vocal capabilities on stage were appreciated by his bandmates, their concern with his commitment to their musical vision caused them to reconsider their choice for a frontman. By November 1986, Majesty had let Collins go and once again needed a vocalist. During this search, the band cultivated a good portion of the instrumental material that would end up on their debut record. Eventually, a new singer was found in 1987, Brooklyn native Charlie Dominici, who impressed the band with his vocal resemblance to Steve Walsh from the band Kansas. He was brought on full-time in November 1987, and 2 years later, the band released their first album through Mechanic Records, When Dreamin' Day Unite, on March 6, 1989. Despite its lackluster production, this one is still a good listen, as it features the band in its infancy during the late 80s, with some awesome tracks such as the instrumental Yetzi Jam and the Killing Hand. However, Majesty quickly needed a new name, since there was already another band named as such. A recommendation from Portnoy's late father, based on a movie theater out in California, was the genesis for the name that has stuck with them since. Dream Theater. A combination of empty promises from Mechanic Records and an eventual realization that Dominici also wasn't the guy led to a different direction. Portnoy recalls this being one of the most frustrating periods of the early days, as it took a year and a half to find their next lead vocalist. Eventually, a tape from the Great White North arrived. It was Kevin James Labrie from Midland, Ontario, Canada, who quickly impressed his future bandmates with his high-range vocals and visual appearance. Before recording their follow-up album, the band fought hard to leave Mechanic Records in favor of a new start with Atco Records. Despite heads clashing between the producers and the band during the recording of the record at Bear Tracks Studio? Images and Words was released on July 7th, 1992 to worldwide acclaim. This one is easily remembered for being the only album to produce a radio hit for the band, Pull Me Under. A super low-budget video was made for it, and it spread like wildfire on MTV. Simply put, this album is one of the true staples of progressive metal, with great tracks such as Take the Time, Metropolis Part 1, Under a Glass Moon, and Learning to Live. Great place to start for any new Dream Theater fan. With the audience now anticipating the follow-up, Dream Theater felt the pressure upon arriving to Los Angeles to record the album. Awake was soon released on October 4th, 1994, to a mixed critical reception and nowhere near the commercial success as its predecessor. On top of the disgruntled reaction from the label, Kevin Moore had followed through on his promise to leave the band during the recording of Awake in favor of focusing on his own songwriting. After auditions for a replacement for Moore to fulfill the dates of the Awake tour, Dream Theater selected Derek Sherinian, who managed to earn a full-time spot in 1995. In more recent years, Awake has gained much more critical acclaim, and for good reason. This more dark, straightforward sound has tons of excellent tracks, including 6 O'Clock, Voices, The Mirror, and Scarred. Another song that had been worked on since 1989 would finally be recorded and released as an EP in September of 1995, A Change of Seasons. It was here where Sherinian was featured on the keyboards for the first time on a Dream Theater studio recording. This 23-minute piece is freaking awesome, as are the cover songs included in the disc. I love the clips from Dead Poets Society in between parts in the title track. With the label East West still desiring a record that appealed more to mainstream audiences, Dream Theater entered Avatar Studios in the summer of 1997. On September 23rd, Falling Into Infinity was released. Although the album has excellent tracks such as Hell's Kitchen and Lines in the Sand, the much more commercial approach did not yield the results the label was looking for, despite a relatively peaceful recording process. This marked another frustrating period for Portnoy, who made it clear that he wanted out after intense disagreements over creative direction with the label and his bandmates. However, once the tour for Infinity ended, Portnoy stayed, and Sherinian was dismissed in favor of another keyboardist who made a monster impression on the band back in 1994. Enter Jordan Rudess, who previously had worked with Petrucci and Portnoy along with bass legend Tony Levin on 2 instrumental records for a side project known as Liquid Tension Experiment. I absolutely love those albums. Dream Theater would also secure their creative freedom for the next record, allowing them to go all out in a self-imposed do-or-die situation. The result was a return to Bear Tracks, and the concept album Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory, the first Dream Theater record released through Elektra on October 26, 1999. A sequel to the original Metropolis track from Images and Words, this piece of art helped revive the band in a big way. Another staple in progressive metal with captivating tracks such as Beyond This Life, Home, The Dance of Eternity instrumental, and The Spirit Carries On. From there, Dream Theater returned to Bear Tracks in March of 2001, the place that was owned by Jay Beckenstein from Spiral Gyro, right? Indeed, the band invested a good portion of that year to create the follow-up, 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. With a plethora of musical influences used during the writing process, the band's 6th record would be their longest to date, requiring 2 discs. On January 29, 2002, the world got to hear exactly why an extra CD was needed. Disc 2 features their longest song thus far, a 42-minute title track. This honestly feels like an entire film unfolding right before my ears each time I've gone back to listen to it. Heavy moments, melodic moments, fast technical playing, fascinating orchestral sections, and deep lyrical reflections of various mental illnesses. As for Disc 1, The Glass Prison is the first entry in Portnoy's lyrical summation of his experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, a set of songs later known as the 12-Step Suite. The song also begins with the exact sound heard at the end of Scenes from a Memory, a neat little feature that I think is simply awesome. I could go on and on about this record, but I'll wrap it up here by saying that this is an incredible follow-up to its predecessor from 1999. This brings us to March 2003. As mentioned previously, it was during the tour for 6 Degrees when Dream Theater noticed strong receptions from live audiences to their heavier material.
So energy, power.
While in Europe playing their final sets of shows, the band performed full album covers of Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast and Metallica's Master of Puppets. The energy the band felt on stage during this time solidified the creative direction of their next release. Less than 70 minutes of unrelenting Dream Theater, filled with heavy riffs and a bombastic live sound in the studio in the same vein as Beast and Puppets. Portnoy explained, "We also looked at all the tunes from our catalog that always go over great live, and it was always the real heavy grooving songs. Pull Me Under, Home, Glass Prison, The Mirror. So we said, let's just make an album where every song is like that. That was the blueprint we outlined." Leaving Bear Tracks studio behind, the band entered a rehearsal studio in New York City and approached the writing process like a garage band. Jam it out and let the ideas spontaneously take shape. In only 3 weeks, the entire album was written and ready to go on April 3rd. From there, it was off to the same place where the story began, Long Island, New York. The recording process took place at Cove City Studios, and overdubbing materialized at Pi Studios. Once Kevin Shirley, mixer of the 3 previous Dream Theater records, helped complete mixing at the Hit Factory in New York, the title of the album and this killer artwork done by the late Jerry Uelsmann were each agreed upon in direct correlation to its grittier approach. Let's now go track by track on what was delivered to fans on this day 20 years ago. As I Am is first, clocking in at a little over 7 minutes. First thing to notice is that the last note/sound from the previous record is the first note/sound of the following record. Tradition continues here, as the final orchestral note from Losing Time/Grand Finale on 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence fills the air. From there, the ominous bass comes in from John Mayung, and it sounds really cool. A heavy barrage of riffage, with lyrics written by John Petrucci on his experience with Queensryche guitarist Mike Stone during a co-headlining tour. Stone was new in the band at the time, and according to Portnoy, was pompously giving Petrucci tips on guitar playing. So with lyrics such as, "You cannot touch the way I play," or "Tell me what to say," it's clear how much Stone's input was not appreciated. I also really like the words, "For those who understand, I extend my hand." since Petrucci also noted that it was in reference to the fans who remained supportive of the band up to that point. Since this was the first track of the record, this also happens to be the first Dream Theater song I ever heard. I've been hooked ever since. I've heard this so many times and still love it as much as when I first heard it. Seeing it live for the first time in 2006 was an experience I'll never forget. Great start to the record, letting us know exactly what to expect the rest of the way. This Dying Soul is next, with an immediate barrage of brutality, picking things up from both the concluding notes from As I Am and The Glass Prison. Indeed, this is part 2 of the 12-step suite, continuing Portnoy's lyrical reflections on his experience in AA meetings. The way Soul slows down briefly before Labríe's first set of vocals join in, creating that eeriness before the heavy riffs kick back into gear, is really badass. I also like that voice effect used during the
"These tormented ghosts of yesterday will vanish when exposed."
Portnoy commented that it sounded like Dave Mustaine meets Satan as recording took place, and I still find that hilarious. As was the case in The Glass Prison, there's some excellent solo work between Petrucci and Rudess during the instrumental breaks, particularly after Labríe's final passage, "I'm ready to break through this prison wall." Yes, lots of similarities to the first track from 6 Degrees. Clocked in at over 11 minutes, this is equally as intense and heavy throughout, with some cool references to its predecessor along the way. I love this one. Endless Sacrifice is the third track and begins in a more melodic fashion. Harkening back to the likes of Scarred and Blind Faith, the band lightly sets the background with a mesmerizing solo from Rudess before Labríe's vocals begin. Suddenly, the familiar heavy tone from the first 2 tracks slices your face open. The lyrics here are a reflection of the band dealing with the puzzle of balancing their musical lives on the road with their family lives at home. I feel like anyone from all walks of life can relate to these words, no matter what the career path may be. The instrumental break features another cool sounding duel from Petrucci and Rudess, a killer little drum fill from Portnoy when the duel ends, and a nice build up from the band, to Labrie eventually joining back in. Another excellent 11-minute piece that sounds really good live. Honor Thy Father begins with a tornado of drums from Portnoy, before Petrucci comes in with a killer riff. Can't help but headbang every time in the opening minutes. This time, the lyrics are written by Portnoy, who vents out his frustrations with his stepfather in his ute. Not shy about expressing how venomous things got, it's no surprise that this one packs quite a punch, both lyrically and musically. The instrumental section includes various clips from different media, similar to Space Divest from Awake and A Change of Seasons, including bits from the films Magnolia and At a Close Range. It's brilliant that Christopher Walken is in the latter, as all the man ever wanted was more cowbell! Thankfully, Portnoy has reconciled his relationship with his stepfather since. A monster 10 minutes of non-stop riffage with some excellent keyboard effects from Rudess during the break. Maybe a good one to blast in your earbuds while throwing weight around. And then another break in the action. A 2-minute ballad known as Vacant. Accompanying Labrie's deep lyrics about his daughter slipping into a coma after a seizure is some beautiful cello playing by Eugene Friesen. Short, sweet, and to the point. Much like the rest of the melodic moments in Endless Sacrifice, Labrie is really good here. This brings us to Orion, the Stream of Consciousness, which joins the Dream Theater instrumental family with John Mayung on lead vocals as usual. The great thing about these pieces in the catalog up to this point is that they all have a different feel to them, and this song continues in line with that. Much more straightforward than the likes of The Dents of Eternity, This one includes more sick riffage from Petrucci, a nice bass groove from my Young in the break, and more cool effects on the keys from Rudis. If you're anything like me, you simply need to hear Vacant and Stream of Consciousness back to back, or else it'll truly feel like something is missing. I especially love this done live on the Live at Budokan DVD from 2004. And now, the final track of Dream Theater's 7th record, bringing the list of songs to a grand total of 7! In the Name of God, the longest song on the album, is a heck of a 14-minute ride. This one has elements of nearly every other song on the record, making it a powerful concluding piece. Riffs to headbang to like in As I Am, high-range vocals from Labrie like in Endless Sacrifice, and top-notch technical playing by the rest of the band during the instrumental break. I can't get enough of the section starting at the 808 mark, where Petrucci and Rudis shred in unison as Portnoy works his signature hi-hat magic. As the title suggests, the lyrics address the dangers of extremism in religion, with some leaders encouraging violence and mass killings in the name of God. Another cool thing is the Morse code section from the 551 mark to the 607 mark, which was later translated to, well, Portnoy tells us himself as he jams the Canadian rap on stage with my Young and Labrie. I'll leave a link to that funny clip in the description below. Around the 1257 mark, the Battle Hymn of the Republic is heard as Rudis plays an excellent solo to conclude the piece. Fun fact, Rudis played this final note with his nose. Another link to that footage will be in the description. Highly recommended documentary. And that'll do it for our look back at Dream Theater's Train of Thought. As alluded to previously, a vocal group of fans expressed their displeasure with the unrelenting, heavier approach on the album, and I can understand that. When you compare this to Awake, which was also grittier than their first two records, there was still more of a balance between the heavy moments and melodic moments in the 1994 release. The Silent Man, Living Shadows Off a Dream, Space Die as mentioned before, all these are good ballads. Here, there's only Vacant. As for the critical reception in the media, reviews were much more favorable. One review from the Washington Post called this the classic metal album that no classic metal band could ever pull off.
So heavy sound, yeah.
Which is really what the band was aiming for, their own master of puppets, if you will. A new audience emerged as a result of Dream Theater's efforts 20 years ago, and I'm so glad I was a part of that group. My passion for the band only grew during the rest of the 2000s, thanks to some great live experiences with my family, and the band being featured on the likes of Rock Band 2 and Guitar Hero World Tour. And now that my favorite drummer has returned to my favorite band, it's great to know that there is a group of new fans who will be able to experience this lineup live for the first time. If that's you watching this right now, enjoy every second of it when the moment arrives. Thank you very much for joining me on this train ride through Dream Theater history. Now let's go all listen to this record again. Carpe diem, lads. Metropolis Part 3 is going to be so great.